He gave her money for the bus, not knowing she was a CEO millionaire, and fell madly in love with him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain fell softly over the city bus stop that evening. Streetlights shimmered against the wet pavement, and the air smelled faintly of gasoline and rain-soaked asphalt. Ethan Cole stood beneath a flickering lamp, shoulders hunched inside his worn denim jacket. His boots were still damp from a long day repairing engines at the auto shop, and his fingers were numb from the cold. In one hand he held a folded bus ticket. In the other, 2 crumpled dollar bills, his dinner money. A few steps away, a woman stood under the same awning. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, her beige coat spotted with rain. She rummaged nervously through her purse, then checked her pockets again. Her movements were quick, desperate, like someone searching for hope that was not there. Ethan glanced at her, then looked away. He did not usually get involved with strangers. Life had taught him that kindness could cost more than it paid back. But something about the way she bit her lip, trying to hide her embarrassment, made him hesitate. The bus engine growled in the distance. She sighed, shaking her head. "I must have left my wallet at the office," she murmured under her breath. Without thinking, Ethan stepped forward and held out his hand. "Here," he said quietly, pressing the $2 bills toward her. "It is not much, but it will get you home." The woman blinked in surprise. "I cannot take that," she said softly. "You need it." He smiled faintly. "I will be fine. Go ahead." The world could use a little more kindness. Their eyes met for a moment. Something passed between them, simple, human, and real. She hesitated, then reached out and took the money, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will pay you back someday." "Do not worry about it," Ethan said. "Just get home safe." "Oh?" The bus pulled up with a hiss of brakes. She climbed aboard, glancing back through the fogged window. Ethan lifted a hand in goodbye, rain running down his face. The bus doors closed, and the vehicle rumbled away into the night. For a long time, Ethan stood there, watching the red taillights fade. He felt oddly lighter, though he knew he had just given away his dinner. Maybe that was worth something more than food. Across town, inside a glass tower that touched the clouds, Clara Vance stepped out of the elevator and into her private office. The city stretched beneath her, a sea of lights reflecting off the windows. She set down her purse and pulled from it the 2 wrinkled bills. Her fingers lingered on them. She had not told him who she was. The chief executive officer of Vance Mobility, one of the biggest transportation companies in the country. She had been at a field inspection, traveling without her driver for once, trying to see how ordinary commuters lived. She had not expected to forget her wallet or meet a stranger who would hand her his last $2 without hesitation. Clara smiled to herself, a little sad, a little curious. "People like that still exist," she murmured. Outside, the rain continued to fall over the city, and somewhere under that same gray sky, a man with empty pockets and a full heart was walking home, unaware that the woman he helped would soon change his life forever. The next morning, the sun crept through the thin curtains of Ethan's small apartment on the east side of the city. The walls were cracked from years of neglect, and the old radiator hissed like a tired animal. Ethan sat at the edge of his narrow bed, rubbing his eyes before reaching for his work boots. The leather was split at the toes, but they still held together. He tied the laces tightly, as if that small act of order could hold the rest of his life in place. He glanced at the clock on the wall, 7:30. Another long day. He had to stop by the shop before his first delivery shift. The bills on the kitchen counter stared back at him, a silent reminder that no matter how hard he worked, it was never enough. Rent was due in 5 days. His mother's medical prescription sat in an envelope beside them, marked unpaid. Ethan sighed and poured himself a cup of coffee from yesterday's pot. It was cold, bitter, and slightly burnt, but he drank it anyway. He had gotten used to the taste of good enough. Downstairs, the city was already awake. The hum of traffic and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery next door filled the morning air. He climbed onto his old bicycle, balancing his toolbox on the back rack. As he rode, the wind bit at his cheeks, but the rhythm of the pedals steadied him. Routine had become his armor. At the auto shop, the familiar clatter of wrenches and smell of motor oil greeted him. "Morning, Cole," his boss called from behind the counter. "That blue pickup needs its transmission checked by noon. Think you can handle it?" "Got it," Ethan said, rolling up his sleeves. He preferred when his hands were busy. Machines made sense. They broke. You fixed them. People were not that simple. As he worked, his mind wandered back to last night, the woman at the bus stop. Clara, though he did not know her name yet, he could still see the way she looked at him through the glass before the bus pulled away. Her eyes full of something he could not quite define. Gratitude, maybe, or sadness. He wondered if she had made it home safely. He told himself it did not matter. She was probably just another commuter in a city full of strangers. Still, part of him hoped she had kept the money. Not for repayment, but as proof that there were still moments in life that meant something. By afternoon, the rain had cleared, and the sky turned the soft blue of early spring. Ethan finished his shift and washed the grease from his hands. He pocketed his day's wages, barely enough for groceries and gas. On his way home, he stopped by a small food stand and bought a cup of soup and a sandwich. The owner, an older woman named Mrs. Kelly, handed him the change and smiled. "You look tired, Ethan. Working too much again?" "Trying to keep the lights on," he said, managing a grin. "You always were a good boy," she said. "You remind me of my son. Keep doing right, even when no one sees." Her words stayed with him as he walked home under the fading light. He thought about how quiet his apartment would be, how the walls seemed to echo his own thoughts. Still, there was comfort in small things: the hum of the refrigerator, the stack of mail he would sort through later, the pencil sketch he had started on the corner of the table. He opened his notebook and drew without thinking, the pencil gliding across the page. The image took shape: a woman standing by a bus in the rain, her hair blown by the wind. He paused, staring at what his hand had created. There she was again, the stranger from last night. He set the pencil down, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You will probably never see her again," he whispered to himself. But somewhere across the city, in a glass tower that touched the clouds, Clara Vance sat at her desk, still holding those same $2 bills. She traced the faded ink with her thumb and thought of the man who had given them without asking for anything in return. She did not know his name, but she could not forget his face. Outside her office window, the city lights flickered to life, one by one. And in that quiet moment, both of them, one rich, one poor, looked out at the same horizon, unaware that fate had already begun to weave their stories together. A week passed before Clara found the courage to do something she had not done in years: step out of her glass office and walk among ordinary people. Each morning, she had stared at the $2 bills on her desk, the edges slightly torn, the ink fading at the corners. It was ridiculous, she told herself. She had handled deals worth millions, yet her thoughts kept returning to the stranger who had offered her his last bit of money without hesitation. That small act of kindness had lingered in her mind, cutting through the noise of board meetings and investor calls. It reminded her of a world she had not seen in a long time. That Saturday, she dressed simply in jeans, a white blouse, and a gray coat. No chauffeur, no designer handbag, no trace of her title. She took the subway instead of her company car, and got off at a quiet neighborhood near the river. The air smelled of coffee and rain-soaked pavement. For the first time in months, she felt anonymous. She walked aimlessly until she reached a park. The trees shimmered with morning dew, and a few joggers passed by with friendly nods. Then she noticed him, Ethan, sitting on a bench with a small sketchbook resting on his knees. His sleeves were rolled up, and a faint smear of graphite darkened his fingertips. He was drawing, completely lost in concentration. Clara hesitated at a distance, her heart thudding faster than she expected. She could have walked away. She could have kept the mystery alive. But something in her urged her forward. "Excuse me," she said softly. Ethan looked up, startled. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sunlight caught her hair, and he recognized her instantly, the woman from the bus stop. "It is you," he said, half smiling. "The rain, the bus. I was not sure if I would ever see you again." I guess the city decided otherwise, she replied, a little breathless. He closed the sketchbook quickly, embarrassed. I was just drawing. It is nothing. May I see it? She asked. He hesitated but handed it over. The page showed a woman standing by a bus in the rain, holding her hair against the wind. Her face was soft but strong, full of quiet sadness. Clara's eyes softened. This is beautiful. Ethan shrugged. It is not finished. Nothing I draw ever feels finished. It does not need to be, she said. Sometimes what is unfinished feels more alive. They sat together for a while, talking about art, the city, and small things that made life bearable. Clara listened more than she spoke. She was used to giving orders, to filling silence with power. But with Ethan, silence felt like peace. When he asked what she did for a living, she hesitated for half a second before answering, I work in transportation. He smiled. So do I, in a way. I fix cars. They laughed. It was an easy sound, light and unforced. For a few moments, they were not CEO and mechanic, not rich and poor, just two people sitting in a park, strangers who somehow felt less alone together. As the afternoon light turned golden, Clara checked her watch. I should go, she said reluctantly. Thank you for sharing this with me. Wait, Ethan said. He tore the drawing carefully from his sketchbook and handed it to her. You should keep it. Consider it a thank you for proving I am not crazy, that you were real. Clara held the paper gently, as if it might crumble in her hands. Thank you, she said. I will take good care of it. When she returned to her apartment that evening, she placed the drawing beside the $2 bills on her desk. The two objects sat side by side, one born of generosity, the other of connection. She did not yet know why they mattered so much, but they made her feel something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Across town, Ethan sat in the same park bench long after she left. The city lights began to flicker on, and he watched the reflection of the river shimmer like broken glass. He did not know her name, and maybe he never would. But he could not shake the feeling that fate had just brushed against his shoulder and whispered, "Pay attention." And though neither of them could see the road ahead, both felt the same quiet certainty that the story which began with two crumpled dollars and a rain-soaked bus stop was far from over. 2 weeks passed before their paths crossed again. By then, Ethan had nearly convinced himself that the woman in the park had been a dream, a fleeting kindness he was not meant to keep. He buried himself in work, patching broken engines and taking extra shifts. But every time it rained, he caught himself glancing at the nearest bus stop, half expecting to see her there again. Fate, however, had its own plans. On a gray Monday morning, Ethan arrived at a local community center where a notice board listed a new project, Vance Mobility, hiring technicians for community outreach program. The company was offering short-term contracts to help repair old city buses and train young mechanics. It sounded too good to be true, but he filled out the form anyway. 3 days later, he received a call inviting him for an interview. The address led him downtown to a sleek glass building that seemed to touch the sky. He straightened his jacket, wiped his palms on his jeans, and walked through the revolving doors, feeling completely out of place. The receptionist smiled politely. Please wait here, Mr. Cole. Miss Clara will see you shortly. Ethan froze at the name. Clara. He told himself it could not be her. Surely there were thousands of Claras in the city. But when the elevator doors opened, and she stepped out in a tailored navy suit, every doubt vanished. It was her, the woman from the bus stop, the woman from the park. For a moment, neither spoke. Her expression softened, though her voice carried the calm authority of someone used to command. Ethan Cole, she said. I did not expect to see you here. He managed a small, bewildered laugh. I could say the same. She gestured toward the meeting room. Shall we? Inside, the city sprawled beneath wide windows. Clara sat across from him, the sunlight glinting off the silver ring on her finger, a simple band, elegant but understated. You applied for our community project, she began. Can you tell me why? Ethan cleared his throat. Because it feels like something that matters. I fix engines every day, but this sounds like fixing lives too. Her eyes warmed at his honesty. That is a good answer. She paused, studying him. You did not mention before that you were a mechanic. You did not mention that you were my boss, he said, smiling faintly. She laughed, the sound genuine and disarming. Fair enough. I suppose we both left out a few details. For a while, they discussed the project, though both knew there was more between them than professional interest. When the interview ended, Clara stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to Vance Mobility, Mr. Cole." As he shook it, Ethan felt that familiar spark, the same quiet warmth he had felt at the bus stop. Only now, he also felt something else. Uncertainty. He did not know how to behave around her anymore. She was his employer now, not a stranger in need. Later that evening, as he left the tower and stepped back into the hum of the city, he looked up at the building's mirrored surface. His reflection appeared small against the glass, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was walking toward something larger than himself. And high above, in her office, Clara watched him disappear into the crowd. A quiet smile touched her lips. She had not planned any of this, yet somehow, the man who had handed her $2 had walked right back into her life this time, not as a passerby, but as part of her world. Ethan's first week at Vance Mobility felt like stepping into another universe. The company headquarters was a maze of glass walls, polished floors, and quiet efficiency. He worked in the technical division, surrounded by engineers with degrees he could never afford. Yet somehow he belonged there. His hands were steady, his instincts sharp, and his ideas practical. Clara visited the workshop often. She claimed she was there to oversee progress on the community project, but everyone noticed how her eyes lingered on Ethan a little longer than necessary. When she spoke to him, her tone softened, shedding the formality that marked her interactions with others. One afternoon, they reviewed a plan for retrofitting old buses with eco-friendly engines. Ethan stood beside a blueprint spread across the table, pointing to a line of notes he had written in pencil. "If we reroute the power flow here, we can save almost 15% on fuel. It is not fancy, but it works." Clara looked at him, genuinely impressed. "That is clever. I like the way you think, Ethan." He smiled awkwardly. "Years of fixing old engines in tiny garages teach you a thing or two about making things last." She nodded. "Maybe that is why I wanted you on this project. You see value where others see waste." They spent long hours together after that, sometimes working late into the evening. They shared sandwiches from the vending machine and stories about their childhoods. Clara confessed that she had lost her parents young and had been raised by her grandmother, who believed success was the only way to stay safe in a world that measured worth by wealth. Ethan listened quietly. "Maybe success is not about what you earn," he said. "Maybe it is about what you can give without expecting anything back." His words struck her deeply. For a moment, she saw him not as an employee or a mechanic, but as something rare, someone unshaken by ambition, guided instead by kindness. Days turned into weeks, and their connection deepened in ways neither of them could explain. Yet beneath the warmth, Clara carried a secret she feared could destroy everything. Only a handful of people at the company knew she was the majority shareholder and chief executive officer. To the rest, she was simply Miss Clara, the director overseeing the outreach division. She told herself she was protecting the project's integrity, but deep down, she was protecting her heart. Ethan, meanwhile, began to feel the shift. He noticed the way people treated Clara with quiet deference, the subtle authority in her tone during meetings. Something about her did not fit the image of a mid-level manager, but whenever he tried to ask, she changed the subject. One evening, as they walked out of the building together, the city skyline stretched before them in gold and blue. "You ever wonder how two completely different worlds can touch for a moment?" he asked. Clara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Maybe it is not about worlds," she said softly. "Maybe it is about timing." They stood in silence, the hum of traffic below blending with the pulse of something unspoken between them. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was steady but unsure. "I do not know what this is, Clara, but whatever it is, it feels real." Her heart raced. "It is real," she whispered, though she knew the truth she was hiding could still tear it all apart. That night, as she looked out from her penthouse window, the $2 bills still framed on her desk caught the city's light. She reached out, touching the glass, and whispered his name. For the first time in years, she was afraid not of failure, but of losing something genuine before it even had the chance to begin. The reveal came on a Thursday morning. The company lobby buzzed with preparations for the annual charity gala, an event meant to showcase Vance Mobility's new community initiatives. Ethan had never been to anything remotely elegant. His job was simply to help transport display equipment to the hotel ballroom. But Clara had insisted he attend the event as a guest. "You deserve to see what you helped build," she had said, her eyes full of quiet encouragement. He had laughed nervously. "I am more of a toolbox and grease kind of guy, not tuxedos and champagne." "Then you will be the most honest man in the room," she replied, smiling. That night, the ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Soft jazz floated through the air, and the scent of roses mingled with the faint aroma of polished silverware. Ethan stood near the back, his borrowed suit a little too tight across the shoulders. He felt completely out of place. The people around him spoke in quick, practiced tones about investments, mergers, and foundation endowments. He was thinking about leaving when a familiar voice caught his ear. "Good evening, everyone," said the master of ceremonies from the stage. "Tonight, we celebrate innovation, compassion, and the leadership of a woman whose vision has transformed public transportation for thousands. Please welcome our guest of honor, Chief Executive Officer, Clara Vance." The room erupted in applause. Ethan froze. His drink trembled in his hand as he turned toward the stage. Clara stepped into the spotlight wearing a navy gown that glimmered under the lights. Her expression was calm, professional, every inch the leader she had been hiding all along. For a moment, Ethan could not breathe. The woman he had known as Miss Clara, the one who shared sandwiches and laughter with him, was the CEO whose name was printed on every paycheck he received. She began her speech, her voice confident yet soft. This project began as an idea to make transportation accessible for everyone, regardless of background or income. But it became something more because of the people who reminded me that change begins with small acts of kindness. Her eyes scanned the crowd and, just for a heartbeat, met Ethan's. People who give not because they have much, but because they care. The applause thundered again, but Ethan could not hear it. His heart pounded too loudly. When the speech ended, he slipped out of the ballroom and into the hallway, needing air. The walls felt like they were closing in, the lights too bright. A few minutes later, Clara found him standing by the terrace, his back to her. "Ethan," she said quietly. He turned, his face pale with disbelief. "So it was all true. You are her. The woman whose company pays my wages, whose name is printed on the side of every bus in this city." She took a hesitant step forward. "I wanted to tell you, but I did not know how. I did not want to change what we had." He let out a hollow laugh. "What we had? You mean the friendship built on a lie? The woman I thought I knew does not exist." "That is not fair," she said, her voice trembling now. "The person you knew is still me." "Then why hide it?" he demanded. "Was this all some kind of game? Did you want to see how the poor man would react when he found out the truth?" "No," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I just wanted to be seen as a person, not as a title." Ethan shook his head, his jaw tightening. "You could have trusted me, but you chose control over honesty." The silence between them stretched like a wound that would not close. Clara tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. "Do not," he said quietly. "Do not make this harder than it already is." He walked away, the sound of his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Clara stood alone on the terrace, the city lights glittering behind her like 1,000 unspoken apologies. She had built an empire on truth and transparency, yet the one person she cared about most had walked away because she could not follow her own rules. Inside the ballroom, the music swelled again, but she could not bring herself to return. She leaned against the railing, the night wind brushing her face. In her hand, she still clutched a small folded note she had meant to give him earlier, an invitation with his name written in her handwriting, a simple message beneath it. "Thank you for changing my world." Now, those words felt like a promise broken before it could even begin. And as the city glowed below, Clara Vance realized that the higher you stand, the farther you can fall when love and truth collide. Days passed, but the distance between them felt like an ocean that neither of them knew how to cross. Ethan stopped showing up at the workshop. He turned in his access badge by mail with a short note that read, "Thank you for the opportunity. Nothing more." Clara sat in her office late every night, the skyline glittering beyond the glass walls. The same city that once felt like hers now looked foreign and cold. The board congratulated her on the gala's success, but their words sounded hollow. She had won admiration from strangers and lost the only person who had ever looked at her without seeing her title. The tabloids began spinning their stories. Photos of Ethan at the event leaked online with cruel captions: "Mechanic charms, millionaire CEO." The gossip spread like wildfire. Some investors questioned Clara's judgment, whispering that the relationship had been a reckless mistake. She ignored them all, but each headline cut deeper than the last. One evening, she returned to the place where it had all begun, the bus stop. The rain was falling again, soft and steady. She stood beneath the same flickering lamp where Ethan had once handed her $2. Pulling the folded bills from her purse, she stared at them through the raindrops. They were wrinkled now, the ink fading, but they still carried the warmth of his kindness. "I am sorry," she whispered into the night. "You gave without knowing, and I took without trusting." Somewhere across the city, Ethan was sitting in his small apartment, staring at the sketch he had drawn of her months ago. He could not bring himself to throw it away. Every time he tried, something stopped him. The hurt was still raw, but beneath it lingered a truth he could not deny. He still cared for her. Two hearts, two cities, one silence that neither of them knew how to break. And yet, even in that silence, the smallest ember of hope still refused to die. A month later, Ethan received an unexpected letter. The envelope bore no return address, only his name written in delicate handwriting he immediately recognized. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a ticket to a new art exhibit at the city gallery. At the bottom of the note were the words, "Please come. There is something I need you to see, Clara." He almost threw it away, but something inside him would not let him. That Saturday evening, he went. The gallery was bright and quiet, the air filled with the soft hum of music. People stood admiring paintings that told stories of everyday lives: mechanics, teachers, nurses, and strangers helping one another. At the center of the room stood Clara. She turned as he entered, her eyes full of hope and fear. Behind her was a framed sketch, the same one he had given her in the park, the woman by the bus in the rain. Below it, a small plaque read, "The beginning of something honest." Ethan stared at it in disbelief. Clara stepped closer. "I did not want our story to end with misunderstanding," she said. "This gallery is not about me. It is about the people who remind the world that kindness still matters. It started with you." She held out the $2 bills, now framed in glass. "I kept these as a promise to live honestly. I am sorry, Ethan." He looked at her for a long moment, his anger melting into something gentler. "You did not have to do all this," he said softly. "I did," she replied, "because the truth should have a voice." And for the first time in weeks, he smiled. The gallery emptied slowly that night, but Ethan and Clara stayed behind, standing before the framed sketch that had once lived in his notebook. The silence between them no longer felt like distance. It felt like understanding. Clara turned toward him, her voice steady but tender. "I built everything in my life by chasing control. But what you gave me that night at the bus stop, those $2, was freedom. You did not give because you had plenty. You gave because you cared." Ethan met her gaze, his eyes softer than they had been in weeks. "I never wanted anything from you," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to be real with me." "I know," she whispered, "and I am. No secrets, no titles, no walls, just Clara." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small velvet box. "When I had this framed," she said, glancing at the glass that held the $2 bills, "I realized something. What began as a simple act of kindness became the moment that changed everything. So I wanted to ask, can we start again? As equals? This time?" Inside the box was a ring, elegant but simple, carved with the words, "For the beginning that was honest." Ethan was silent for a moment, then smiled a small, quiet smile that reached his eyes. "You know," he said, "I do not have much to offer, but if you are asking me for honesty, that is all I have ever had to give." "Oh," Clara laughed softly through her tears. "That is all I ever wanted." He took the ring and placed it gently on her finger. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Around them, the last lights of the gallery flickered, reflecting off the framed drawing and the $2 bills that had started it all. A year later, the city buzzed with excitement. as Vance Mobility unveiled its newest public transit hub, a modern station dedicated to community art. In the center of the entrance hung the same sketch, now blown up on a mural. Below it, the inscription read, "Kindness moves the world forward." Ethan stood beside Clara, their hands entwined as cameras flashed around them. Reporters asked questions about business and innovation, but Clara only smiled and said, "It all began with $2 and a bus stop." When the ceremony ended, the crowd dispersed, leaving the two of them standing in the glow of the evening lights. The air smelled of rain again, just like the night they met. Ethan pulled her closer and whispered, "Funny how life gives back what you least expect." Clara leaned against him, her voice barely above a breath. "No," she said, "life gives back exactly what you give away." As the first raindrops began to fall, they stood together beneath the same gray sky that had once separated them. Only now, it felt like home, a place built not by wealth or status, but by love that began with a mistake and ended with something true. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by light and rain, Ethan and Clara's story came full circle, their best mistake, their perfect beginning.